Welcome to the Journey Podcast, where we talk freight, sales, tech, the market, and everything in between. My name is Will Jenkins, CEO and founder of Journey. Let's get it.
Hello and welcome to our webinar with Shannon Breen, CEO and founder of FreightVana. My name is Will Jenkins, and we're going to dive into all the things that Shannon and his team have done the last few years to climb into the top 100. Really looking forward to diving in here. So let's set the stage as we go ahead and get started. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll go ahead and answer those as we get rolling. A little bit of background on Journey, and then I'll give Shannon an opportunity to introduce himself. My name is Will Jenkins, CEO and founder of Journey. I've been in the space for about 12 years now. I had the opportunity to co-found Molo back in the day. I led our sales team, did a whole lot of fun startup stuff that made me more stressed than I had ever been during the time building that stuff, man. But we're really prepared myself to be able to build a handful of other businesses. Now I run a company called Journey, and we do recruiting, consulting, and training. And I get the opportunity to talk to really cool people like Shannon and learn about their entrepreneurial journey and some of what their teams are working on. So I look forward to hearing a little bit about what you've been able to do here, Shannon. But you mind giving us a quick introduction?
Yeah, thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
15 years in industry, CEO and founder here at FreightVana. So we just passed our 5-year anniversary, which is really exciting. Got, in that 15 years, worked for a large asset-based company and then left that publicly traded world to build FreightVana from the ground up with a really talented team that we have here. So it's been arduous, it's been educational, it's been all the things, as you know, in building a business. And so excited to kind of unpack that with you here. And, local here in Phoenix is our headquarters. And so it's a great time. It's certainly got its fair share of challenges, but we're really blessed and excited to be a part of the ecosystem and transportation. And you and I have known each other for years now. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt like I knew you a lot. We met formally at Manifest 2024. And I think we ran into each other kind of in the hallway in between, some of the different conversations. And, it's been fun fostering a relationship since that point. But I want to dive into the things that you and the team have worked on that are different than the rest of the field. So we talked about this as we were planning, what do we want to talk about and what makes FreightVana unique. But you've done some slightly counterintuitive things, some things that maybe other brokerages would be afraid to do and stuff that they would never go ahead and attack. So talk to me about why that seemed important when you started FreightVana, coming from the background that you came from, and why you would want to do a few things, against the grain.
Yeah, I think before I, quit, effectively, or resigned is the professional term, from the corporate career that I had, right? If you're going to put all chips in, I really obsessed and thought about what would be unique in the marketplace, right? I think there's been a lot of successful brands. There's a lot of people moving, certainly a lot of load, but to be a new entrant at this point, right? We're still in the midst of COVID when I'm talking and thinking about this. I started having conversations with my close, friends and kind of exploring your point, this differentiation of what a logistics brand could be. And what would be valuable to those people in that seat, right? A lot of people kind of build companies because that's what they believe in, but I really wanted to get kind of the idealism and the thoughts and the passion from the shippers and say hey, if I built something like this, would that be interesting and why? And what would challenges and complications of that? So did a lot of that work and that pre-work. And then it kind of just synthesized in this way where I felt look, there is a place for a differentiated logistics company. I'd had the benefits in my publicly traded career to kind of stand up a power only unit from the ground up. So I kind of got to build a business within a very vast, large, experienced business, but I got to build that power only. And so a couple of those key attributes of differentiation when building FreightVana was I want to build this power only division from the ground up, right? We can unpack that a little bit further and what the value unlocks. And that I also, from a brokerage perspective, want to build it under a non-commissioned enterprise structure, meaning our carrier reps that are working with our carriers are not incentivized by transactional margins, meaning our managers are not incentivized by transactional margins with working with our planners and our shippers. And so those were there was other pieces, the brand, the growth, the marketing, all these pieces kind of fed the funnel. But the two really core differentiating factors was non-commissioned and a power only asset intensive trailer division that could certainly be differentiated in the marketplace and earn a spot, let's say, in the routing guides of different shippers when, quite honestly, they have thousands, as we all know, to choose from. So how are you going to set yourself apart in a field of
Oh, yeah.
crowded folks and competitors.
So we're going to tackle and really dive into those two things as the conversation keeps going. But I'm curious, early on, as you were recruiting people and adding early employees and high level individuals to start the business with, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I've been in sales my entire life. I cannot wrap my head around being a non-commissioned seller for an organization. How did you convince people that this was the right plan and that the structure was the right way to build the foundation of what you guys were doing?
I think for a lot of the people that I worked with early stage, right, those are folks that I had worked with for 10 years. So you realize you're not convincing a lot of strangers. Your resume, how you've shown up, what you've produced, hopefully how you've acted in the tough moments, what you've built, like that resume is really what sells. And so when you give people an opportunity to just, hey, here's what we want to build, they have a belief in you that's beyond maybe the X's and O's, because they've seen how you've operated, you've seen how you've treated them. That was really the powerhouse behind our, let's call it meteoric rise, or let's call it unique rise in the industry, is that like we started the company very uniquely. It wasn't bootstrapped. We had 20 plus professionals from a variety of skill sets that all believed in that mission. And that was a power. So it wasn't necessarily getting them to believe in those two pieces. I think it was, hey, do you believe in what's possible? And do you believe in this collective team? And I think the resounding answer was yes. And it allowed us to get that start that we have.
That says a lot, man. You think about being able to attract talent. And if that talent has some exposure to what you've done previously, and they trust that you're the kind of person that's going to do what you say you're going to do and has the drive to build something, starting from zero is not easy. Starting from zero with a really talented group is even harder, because those people are going to make choices and say, hey, and I'm leaving something that's safe and stable. And I'm probably making really good money to go do this thing with Shannon. Like, my family's going to think I'm crazy, like all this stuff. That's really hard to do. So, kudos to you for building those relationships 10, 12 years in advance. So they had the confidence in you to say, hey, I trust this guy.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned those pros. You're not bringing in new folks that don't, like, quote unquote, know the industry, know better. Like, you're watching experienced seasoned pros be like, wait, we don't have any loads here. We don't have any customers here. We don't have any TMS here. We don't have any contract. We have nothing. Like, you literally walk in day one and you're like, you watch people kind of fidgety, right? Like, there's this transition where you're watching people like so out of water be like, wait, hold on. Like, I don't have emails. I also don't have anything, And so we have to build everything from the ground up. But I think that brings a team together. It creates a ton of learning experiences, which if I look back on my journey, I know. I get it. I don't know how much you said you were going to pay me every time I use the word, but every time. Many times in, but how much you learn on that journey, the relationships. And I think the biggest blessing that I had, Will, is just the opportunity to lead and who I get to show up for every day. Like, that actually means a ton for me in this experience. And so that's the part I'm blessed with.
I love it, man. So let's talk a little bit about things that you have learned the past couple of years. So it's been 5 years, as you mentioned, and you've had the opportunity to grow FreightVana and become a top 100 player here in the space. So what are some things that it took to get there? And then the second follow-up part is, what are some things that you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, what it took to get there, and you read about this and all the things, and I am blessed with this attribute, but it's a ton of grit, right? Because it has been an arduous climb in the face of the freight recession, which a lot of your folks and industry folks know, right? On the shipper side, that's been a benefit, but you're constantly investing, right? Imagine investing in team, investing in equipment, all the different pieces to build, while at the same time the industry's telling you, yeah, but do it cheaper and then cheaper and then cheaper and then cheaper. So like that, I'd say the learning was that, like, we'd been through cycles. I'd been in the industry a decade. I'd seen multiple sides of the cycle, but I've obviously never seen a cycle that long. And so I just would have never imagined that would have extended as long as it did. And then now we're having this talk today. And over the last 2 months, we're on the whipsaw effect of that turning and rearing its head, which creates even new challenges. But the learnings, I would say, in that, just being able to, like, no matter, I was on the phone with my dad the other day, right? And it's funny, and everybody can probably, whether friends, family, everything, like, it never goes, there's no script, right? This is truly life. And so it definitely didn't go by a script. I thought we would be even further along, doing, better than we are today. Maybe not as much pain. Yeah, certainly we're going to do our market, but that wasn't the case. And then, I think the other pieces are just all the other rooms you end up as a founder finding, the things that you don't appreciate about your last life, right? I was having this conversation with that works in corporate America is people are like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be my own boss. I'm like, you're only extrapolating the best parts of it. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm just telling you there's also a place where as you're working for a company, there's massive benefits that I underappreciated when I was working for a company, right? Things like healthcare, things like time off, vacation, like
Totally.
focus. Like you just get a lot of things that you don't get if you take the entrepreneurial journey. So I was trying to like give the fair, I am an entrepreneur. I've got a passion for entrepreneurship. I love what I do, but like for people are like, yeah, that's it for me. I'm like, yeah, you got to consider all the variables when you dive in and the risks involved. And so try to be a metered kind of in the middle sounding board for folks that have those questions about entrepreneurship in general.
Totally. So I want to double click on one thing, which is the climb, right? You all started FreightVana during peak COVID times, right? And have battled through the slump and are now on the other side, hopefully for a while. We'll see how it plays out. One of the things, to go on a slight tangent, that I talk with a lot of our consulting clients about now is act like this window is going to close, because you can't control how the market dictates what's going on. And so you got to hustle and make sure you add new logos so that when you're on the other side of it, you're positioned well. But you guys did that, right? You battled through the slump, and now you have the opportunity to continue to grow and be a, even more important player in the top 100. But how in the world did you do that, right? Because I can't imagine starting from zero in 2021 and then going through 2022. I think we realized the market was really starting to decline early 2022, probably March of 2022. You're looking at at RFPs and revenue per load and volume. You're going, things are dropping out. How in the world did you crack the top 100 after 4 years of a deflationary market?
I think people seeing those attributes that we laid out for you, those are two big components, right? Hey, if I'm going to bet on something different, tell me what you're going to do different, tell me what you're going to plan different. I think we had a very experienced team that could deliver on the goods, right? So you had an experienced team. So when we did customer onboarding, constantly had, like, geez, your team like showed up like dialed, right? And so having that level of pros, right, allowed us to show up differently than I'd say the average, at least based on their feedback to us. So we're investing in the trailers. We have the unique operating model. The team shows up really strong. And I think, look, the other attribute that has carried us is just a collective passion for the growth and a unity. And I think that shows out in our work product. I think that shows up in the way we integrate. And even the way we show up for our carriers during that challenging time, because they felt like we were having honest conversations and they would ride with us and still stay with us today. Even through some choppy water. So I think all of that stuff is really what helped set us apart. And the branding, right? The branding market. We came on the scene 5 years ago. Interestingly enough, but the bar was so ineptly low for branding and marketing and social. And I got to give credit to Josh, and I have a passion for it. And we really wanted to have fun and wanted to be unique and wanted to kind of mix it up on social. And at that time, if you go back 5 years ago, not many brands doing that. And the brands that were doing it, they all looked the same, and it was pretty cookie cutter, and it wasn't very entertaining. And so I think we caught a lot of attention and positive attention, just the way we showed up as a brand, as a team, through authenticity and just telling people how it is, and making fun of ourselves at times or whatever it took, just to let people know that, hey, behind the scenes, we're just really good folks that love the industry and want to be, a part of the businesses that we've sought out to work with.
I couldn't agree more. You and I could jam on marketing and some of those principles for days. I think there's so much to what you've built, and it helps you stand out in an unbelievably crowded space. You need to be unique if you're trying to break through, both to get in front of shippers, to get in front of talented employees that you want to join your team, to find the best carrier partners. You can't be cookie cutter. You got to be different.
Yeah.
So let's talk non-commission model, my friend. Right now, you mentioned earlier that your team is not commissioned to make more as they transact with partners. And that is a core fundamental of how you've built the business. So talk to us a little bit about why build it that way and how you've been able to teach the team to perform as they have performed in a model like that.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, going back to those conversations I had with those shippers, right? Kind of, let's call it pre-even foundation of FreightVana, but just the idea of what we wanted to be. And I felt like in my career, and I felt through my relationships, there was just an overall lack of trust, right? And accountability. And then the word that gets used a lot around here with our shippers and us is alignment, Like the shippers are trying to capture a goal, but if you think about the way a core brokerage works, there's nothing wrong with it. It's purely capitalistic. But like the brokers and the account managers are trying to extrapolate as much margin from every load because that's how they're being incentivized. Like that's literally how they get paid. And then you're working with a shipper who's trying to accomplish something. And so immediately I feel like you have two wheels that, yes, they intersect, but like they're trying to accomplish sometimes uniquely different goals. And so by taking out commissions, having the professional team we have, we felt like those circles aligned even more. And so then we really got down to the root problems. We're really looking to solve problems. Clearly, we need to make money and profits in order to run our business, but it never needs to be transactional, right? And it never needs to feel opportunistic. And so what we've seen as we've started to work with certain shippers, we've built a different level of trust in the way that we operate with them on a daily basis, the analytics that we share with one another. And that has allowed us to grow expansively in these, as opposed to being a transactional partner that gets in the game, but they always kind of hold you at bay because they're like, yeah, but if you think about a shipper's purview, they're trying not to get harmed. And they're not trying to get taken advantage of. And then they don't see how the sauce is made. And the incentives might not be aligned. Or they feel like they got hurt on a Friday night when they needed that last truck. And they paid for it, but they didn't love that. And so I wanted to figure out a way to take down those industry kind of scenarios. And by pulling commissions off, I felt like it created this really unique way for us to do it. That's the positive aspect of it. There's drawbacks, there's puts and takes in an aspect of life. I mean, people would say that, hey, like folks aren't going to grind as hard and this and that really also though, like wasn't the goal. Like we didn't want people to feel like they had to grind, 20 hours a day as a broker or carrier rep to be successful in the industry, and felt like the type of employee was changing, the type of work they wanted to do changed. So we actually felt like that really kind of fit a professional role that maybe wasn't quintessentially a freight broker that would, answer the call every day, every night. Cause like, I don't want to answer the call at 11 p.m. at night, but we have nighttime teams. We have weekend teams. We could create a support staff to do that. Commissions doesn't have to be the driving factor for how we build the operation. So that was kind of that flipping the old model and then challenging the status quo. And I'd say puts and takes. It's got its benefits, it's got its drawbacks, but it served us really well as truly standing out in a very crowded field.
Totally. One of the things I always think about would be specifically, the pushback I might get in a scenario like that, right? Maybe reps don't buy as well, or maybe they're not as focused at finding the right partner at the right cost. How do you guys combat that when you think about specifically on the carrier side?
I love that. And here's how I've responded to it. One, there's so many analytics out there, right? So we have analytics for days on buy versus market, lead time, purchase. So we're able to, it's not like we're just flying blind, hoping that just because they're not making money on every load, that they're not held accountable like to something. So you've got all this market intelligence that quite honestly in our careers has expanded ridiculously. So you have plenty of markers to know whether you're in market. The other thing that's actually been an interesting benefit, we can't have a podcast or a discussion on logistics without saying the words Montgomery, right? Or SCOTUS. So we could check those off our bingo card now together, Will. But
correct.
The other part of that is I'd ask the question, this goes back to alignment, not for all, but for some, what corners are you willing to cut in order to create such margin, right? So for years, we've kind of had this high standard. We've got millions of dollars based in equipment. We've had these standards for onboarding and carriers to protect ourselves, to protect our ship. But think about that time when many other people are like, oh, I'll use anybody. And we just have never been that brand. So it's actually been underserved. But as the market kind of comes back to this point, we're like, wait, hold on. There's subsections of carriers you shouldn't use. There's carrier insurance that isn't good. There's other that you should be filtered. We've always had those filters. And so it's been highly sub-optimized for us as a business for 4 years. But in the last, let's call it 4 or 5 months, it's interesting. The market almost feels like it's coming back to where we were at. And so we don't have to change our operating model to adapt to that necessarily, right? And I think that is a piece. So for our carriers, we're not making decisions. We're not incentivized to push the corners, but we're trying to find the carriers that can fit our standard, the carriers that can take care of our equipment, the carriers that can take care of our customers, the carriers that can do the communication, and profit's not the reason why we drove. So the argument would be, yes, you don't buy as well. I think we have metrics that have shown that we still are pretty competitive in what we do here. And at the other end, you're not incentivize people to cut corners and find those angles, which I think bring on additional risk and honestly not long-term quality, which we've sought here as a
I
company.
think there's a lot to be said about that last part in terms of mitigating risk. You all have been doing that for quite some time. And so you're not new to, maybe eliminating certain partners that you won't transact with and having a particular bar for the threshold of certain compliance standards or ways that your carrier partners service your freight. So stepping into the Montgomery ruling is probably not much different than what you all had been doing. Maybe there's a couple more I's and a couple more T's that, I's you got dot and T's that you cross to make sure it's done properly. But this isn't new infrastructure or new processes based on what you all have done. So I'm sure that's an inherent advantage because it's not getting easier to select carrier partners, I'll tell you that much.
No, and you mentioned like the next market, and it's interesting. Someone said to me the other day, I had this statement the other day you could appreciate. I said, hey, there's a shippers market, right? And then there's a carrier market. Like, what's the brokers market? Like that ends up being a very interesting question that we're trying to say it almost like cheekily, right? But you're actually being like you have to figure out like how you're going to create value for us. It's the type of carriers. It's the network. It's the security on the trailing equipment. It's the tracking ability. It's that rigor that we bring to the table for our shippers. But you're right, like sourcing carriers, especially where this world's heading, is going to be sourcing carriers and recruiting drivers. I mean, you want to talk about the hills to climb next. Those are going to be the ones for everybody that continues to take the leap and grow their institutions. And none of that's going to come easy for anybody.
Absolutely not. So we had a couple of questions come in before we started. One of them I want to go to now. So one question is around shipper fit. So when you think about the types of shippers you all go after, who's the best type of shipper for the way that you all operate?
I mean, naturally, I tell people there's kind of two folds, right? One is definitely for drop equipment. There's a lot of large brands that are kind of reliant on big asset companies because of those trailer pools, the way that their DCs, their operation works. And we become an interesting, almost insurance or optionality play for them because we can help by saying, look, we can tap into the long tail. We can provide you a, similarly logoed, trailer pool that you can tap into. So for that particular segment, we're really good. And then I'd also say in the mid-market, what's interesting and where we've seen a lot of success is if you watch a lot of brokerages and if you see it from the inside out, and even some of the large publicly traded ones used to highlight this in their earnings reports, which I, as a finance guy, always thought entertaining, right? You basically tell which segments of shippers that you're screwing them the most. So some used to do that literally in their quarterly reports. And I was just like, dude, does no one read these reports? Am I just a sicko? I'm the only one reading financial reports of like the big players as I'm learning the industry in my early days.
You are a sicko.
But even like
That's
shippers,
correct.
it's interesting. Like you're partnered, you're doing tens of millions of dollars. You don't want us like see like how your biggest, but no, like no one really studies at that level, right? I found interesting. But my point in all that mid-market. So it's long known that like in the mid-market and the small market shippers, like that's where typically the largest margins get made. And what's interesting about our non-commissioned operating model, even if we're not supplying them with drop trailers, they really like that partnership and knowing that someone's going to show up differently because they don't have all the tools that your large national, mega brands and Fortune 500 shippers would have. So I'd say like our transparency plays very well in the mid-market and our trailer pools play really well in that kind of large cap Fortune 500 space. So they're kind of like, it's a little bit separate to say all, but I wanted to kind of break that down for like where those two kind of differentiators play differently and what's made us successful. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you think about their buying power. They're not small shippers by any means, but they're not the largest enterprise shippers in the world. And so we all know that they're going to get treated differently than the largest couple $100 million freight spend organizations. And so it's an interesting kind of wedge in the market to say we can provide large enterprise-like service to you, the same stuff that you would get if you were moving thousands of shipments on a daily basis, but do that in a manner that supports your business. And because of the non-commission model, they can feel more comfortable that they're buying at the right levels.
And they even get some data and analytics to help validate that. So then, I'm saying on that back end, you start to solidify that relationship and show up in ways that they're like, okay, like I'm okay with that. By the way, like they want you to be successful. That's the most interesting thing. Like most of the shippers want you to be successful because if you're not successful, And how are you going to have staying power? And that was another reason of like, not necessarily, I always use this line and maybe you'll appreciate it well, but I tell like the shippers, look, you don't take me to the outhouse. I'm not going to incentivize my team to take you to the penthouse. But in that middle, we will find a level of partnership and accountability and growth that suits us both. By all means, play those games with other folks. But like, I can't do the penthouse. I won't take you to the penthouse, but I can't operate in the outhouse. And honestly, a lot of folks are like that's been a large part of our success is like we won't be doing these extraordinarily large, rips, and we don't bang gongs around here. We don't do all that prototypical stuff. But at the same time, right? Like shippers respect that, and they're not looking at us as being like their low cost provider that's going to like be subsidizing their freight costs like we've seen
Totally.
the entrants over the last 7 years try to do and fail miserably at.
There's a lot to be said about the premise of finding partners that want to see you succeed. This is a two-way street. And so if you are partnered with shippers that are going to squeeze every dime out of you from a cost perspective and really, really see you as the low cost provider, there's not a really long runway in that. And there's also not a long runway when someone looks and they go, you've taken advantage of me, right? Like no one wants to be on either side of that discussion. And so I've always really thought that your best shipping partners should be aware of the goals that you have and where you want to see your business go and things that you can do together. That's not going to be every shipper, right? It's going to be a small subset that you really need to be able to go deep with. But the ones that do care about your success are going to help you grow your business. And the ones that don't, like you have to make a business decision around how do we transact with them? Because the rules are a little bit different.
And that's
what I think what you set up. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was saying that's where the incentives I think are so important though. Because in a traditional model with, let's call it mid 20, early 30-year-old, early professionals in the industry, I'm literally paying you to figure out where the penthouse is. You're literally incentive, like, and they're not going to sit there and be like, oh, well, Will Jenkins onboarded this shipper 4 years ago. We've got a large strategic partnership. Like he's played golf with these guys. He knows them. No, he's just thinking, or she's just thinking, how do I make as much money I can for my July paycheck? And so everything that like, I have honest intentions, your organization, you value the long-term part, but the incentive is literally say, figure out where the penthouse is. Cause most, like, I'll be honest, like, I don't know how many people are playing the long game at 25 in a role that doesn't like, they're playing the game that's in front of them and their game isn't the long game usually. It's
not.
Get paid in July game plan under those mechanisms. And that was a key, everything we just talked through of why being different.
I like it, man. So one of the things that we talked about earlier when we were prepping here was the difference between the power only network that you all have built versus what others may claim that they have set up. They're going to be, different brokers that do have a power only offering. But you mind talking to me about what's different in your power only offering based on the fact that you all have invested in purchasing equipment and how you all use that to your advantage?
Yeah, I think one is the equipment to start, right? So I mean, if people have trailers, you can go lease trailers. You can go lease how many trailers you want. You can run those. How are those trailers tracked? What telematics do you have in them? Do you have cargo sensors? Are they linked to your TMS? Can you send EDI directly off the telematics in the trailers? Like, so you just get into the trailers alone. Are they all similarly logoed and identifiable? Like, there's one whole spectrum of questions that most people can't deliver on. That say, oh yeah, we have trailers too, right? That's just the hardware, the equipment, and the integration. That is a big piece that most people, they sell into because it sounds good to have trailers, but they can't do the other stuff on the back end because they haven't really invested in that way. And then the other big piece to unpack there is the network effect, the density. So when you look at, and most people don't ask this question, but if you ask most brokers what their average length of haul is for their power only division or sector, they're going to come back and tell you begrudgingly if they know the stat, or they're not going to share it, or they'll have to go figure it out and get back to you, which already tells you that it's probably an answer you don't want to hear. It's probably less than 200 miles. Most of the ones that operate run that 200 less than miles. And what that basically is telling you is they're running bespoke, dedicated, light operations, meaning the trailer can go out and back. They're running in high density corridors. All that's valuable. We do some of that as well, but what they can't do is they can't connect market to market. They really can't compete with regional carriers. In order to compete and connect most major markets, East Coast, West Coast, you have to have a length of haul that averages more than 5. So the question that
those are they're just transactional power only business, right? You can spin up a carrier network to, work through a project over the weekend, but we're not repositioning equipment to be utilized in other markets. It is purely, I need this now. And so, yeah, sure, I can get you some power only capacity. Very, very different than the offering that you're explaining.
It's a pop-up fleet. And going back to my old days, we used to use the term pop-up fleet, but it's a pop-up trailer fleet. It solves a solution for a customer. It's not a network build. You're not tying in. And then the last one is that network effect. Like, how many different shippers do your trailers connect with on a weekly basis? People are like, whoa, like that'd be a crazy question. Like, no, that is the question to ask. Like in our world, that looks like over 50 weekly. 50 of the largest shippers in the country, right? And we build that out, that becomes the power in the network that we're building. But if hey, Will, you run power only, I can get you trailers. Cool. How many people do your trailers touch on an average weekly basis? 2. Well, that's a crazy network. Like, what trucking network are you going to build off 2 shippers? The answer, 0. You have to have density and scale, and most don't, but they like selling into the fact that they have trailers that can acquire trailers. But those are the key differentiators when you think about what we're attempting to do, what we're building towards, the tech we're building around that network and density effect that truly can compete with some of the largest regional and national trucking companies in the country. Like that's the journey that we're on.
So we just got a good question that is very timely, and it's around asking questions to someone who is building a power only network. So I'll frame this. If you're a shipper today and you're coming to a provider that says they have a power only network, what types of questions should they be asking to validate if that's the right type of carrier to do work with over that particular service?
Yeah, I already hit one of them. That would be my top question, would be your average length of haul. I think you learn 8 things by that one question. So I'd ask the average length of haul as a starting point, because I think that's a powerhouse to just cut through all of the noise. The other thing is, explain to me the technology and telematics on the trailers and how they integrate into your operating system. So we are fully integrated with all the major tracking pieces. Our trailer telematics have 15 satellites. We can update, like, while everybody's doing driver cell phones, we have this entirely different grade of tracking that we put on top of cell phones. Most folks that actually are claiming to have power only, they can't do that with how they've set up their systems and their operating teams. And so that'd be my second question. I think by the time you've asked those 2 questions, you've learned a lot. How many trailers do you have? How many customers do you touch? Would probably be good 3 and 4 questions. But by the time you've asked those 4, I think you're gonna be able to cut through all the noise as a shipper and see if what you have in front of you is actually going to solve problems, or if it's just a creative sales pitch to get someone in the door.
Totally.
I think that's what I would, if I had sat in the shipper's seat, that's exactly what I'd be asking.
Yeah. So we're going to get ready to wrap up here shortly. We have a couple of other questions before we do, but one that I really want to make sure we got to is, what would you tell someone who is thinking about going out to start their own shop or go and attack their own entrepreneurial journey? What do you think is different now than it was when you started? And what are some pieces of advice you might share to someone that's considering that?
Yeah, I think it only got harder from a logistics third-party perspective based on the changing climates of liability and all the pieces. Like insurance, nothing gets cheaper, right? So if I was a new entrant starting, it'd be like, cool, how exactly are you going to differentiate? Because everybody's got all the customer information. Everybody can access who the decision makers are. What exactly are you going to be offering that's so different than the other, consider it 300 people that are calling that same person on any given week or month? And honestly, we got a good team. We really love service. We have this huge carrier base. Like, none of that lands anymore. Like, that stuff has been so ran over. Like, it really has to be like, I guess that's the piece I would challenge anybody that's starting from scratch. Like, what exactly is it going to be a niche? Or are you going to do it? You're going to find that niche that you're going to solve problems that you feel like is, missed by either large brands, or there's just no one doing this, or you're going to do it better. How? You're going to have a different tech layer that's going to do it differently, but it can't just be people, carrier network, good service. Like, I don't know how anybody's going to grow and scale in this business with all the costs and liability, with that being the core fundamentals, especially if you want to do it at scale. Now, if you want to be an agent, you want to do it for your own self, I totally see that. But if you're trying to build a national brand, I'm not sure how you climb that mountain at this stage of the game with the way it's laid out today.
That is one of my favorite responses to that question, because I think it's the core of starting a business to begin with. What is it that you do that your customers can't get from anyone else? What is it that makes you uniquely positioned to service them? And we were working with a consulting client of ours yesterday, and we're on our third or fourth go-to-market strategy iteration conversation and going back and forth about what it is that makes you different. They're listing a couple of things, and I'm like, everybody says that. Everybody says that, right? After, one, and then you finally start to get to the meat and potatoes, and you're like, that's why people buy from you. But you need to start with that before you go and say, hey, I'm going to build this, as you mentioned, large national brand that I'm going to use to compete against the rest of the field. Brother, everybody's saying they got a lot of trucks and they pick up on time and they've got a great network and they've got a great team. So that's not that unique.
Yeah. And I'd say the competition just gets it gets more and more commoditized by the day, and the competition gets bigger and consolidates and has even more tools. So that's who you're competing against, unless once in you're going to go after a certain niche and that's where you're hone your focus. But you gotta be, otherwise you're just, to me, you're playing a hand, and you're not going to have all the cards, and that's okay, because that's what, and you got to lean in, you got to trust yourself. But at the end of the day, like, you also got to make sure you're realistic and understanding the landscape of the work that's about to be done and the opportunities ahead.
100%. So Shannon, as we get ready to wrap up here, where are the best places for people to reach out to you? What are the best ways for people to get in touch with you and your team at FreightVana?
Yeah, I feel like I need to be on some other platforms. I've got a couple of people that have said I need to be on. I don't know if you made your journey over to X and you're on.
I'm there. I'm there, brother.
How long you been there, Will? Tell everybody.
A long time. I actually tweeted a freight meme every day for almost 2 straight years. And I got free tickets to Freight Waves in perpetuity for the rest of my life as a result of being a meme king champion. So I've been locked in on X and Twitter for a while.
Yeah, so maybe I need to join you there. But for me, to answer the question, LinkedIn, I typically do a lot there. I got a lot of customers on LinkedIn, put a lot of content out on LinkedIn. But LinkedIn's by far my best and favorite. And then, apparently I got some work to do on X. I don't know if I can do a meme a day. That's probably a stretch. But I'll get on there and I could mix it up a little bit.
I love it, man. Well, I always appreciate the opportunity to sit down and chat with you, Shannon, and congrats on what you and your team have built. I'm excited to see you all continue to build, man. And thank you very much for joining us.
I appreciate you, Will. Thanks for having me, man.
Yes, sir. I'll catch you later.